Oh, you beautiful architects of chaos, you walking contradictions, you silent storms that nobody saw coming. Welcome back to the moment everything changes. Because right now, as you're watching this, there's a file being passed around. A document. A leaked conversation. A thread of messages that was never supposed to see daylight. And in that file, your name is mentioned 17 times. 17. Not as a victim, not as a cautionary tale, not as someone they pitied. No, no, no. Your name appears as the one variable they couldn't control, the outcome they never predicted, the result that broke their entire formula. They thought they had you figured out, documented, archived, but what just leaked? What's circulating right now in rooms you'll never see? It's the confession they swore they'd take to the grave. Let me paint you the picture, because this isn't speculation anymore. This is confirmed, verified, stamped with the kind of truth that makes people delete their search history. For the last 3 years, there's been a group. Not a conspiracy, not some secret society nonsense, but a collection of people, former friends, old colleagues, bitter exes, jealous observers, people who claimed they moved on. And they've been keeping records on you. Every post you made, every move you took, every silent month you disappeared, they logged it. They had a shared document. Timestamps, screenshots, analysis. Everything they did, they were trying to decode you like you were some ancient text they needed to decipher before you became too powerful to contain. And here's the part that's going to make your blood run cold and your ego smile at the same time. They failed. Every single hypothesis they had about you, every prediction they made, every moment they thought you'd break, collapse, beg, or crawl back. Wrong, dead wrong, catastrophically wrong. And now the leak, the full document, it's out there. Not publicly, not yet, but it's moving through circles. Whispered about in private chats, shared with shaking hands. Because what it reveals isn't your weakness, it's their obsession. What it exposes isn't your downfall, it's their inability to move on. What it proves beyond any doubt is that while you were healing, evolving, and becoming untouchable, they were stuck in a time loop, refreshing your life like it was the only channel that still had signal. And the funniest part? The part that's got them scrambling to cover their tracks? They admitted in writing that you were right all along. But let's talk about what's actually in this file, because the details are absolutely unhinged. Page 1 starts with a timeline, your timeline, mapped out like you're some kind of historical event they needed to study. January 2022, they went silent. March 2022, new profile picture, possible rebrand. July 2022, no activity, suspected breakdown. They weren't just watching, they were narrating your life, like sports commentators calling a game you didn't know you were playing. And the comments, these little notes in the margins, they're dripping with fear disguised as concern. Notice how they never respond anymore. They never say no. That's not healing, that's detachment. Detachment means they're planning something. Planning something? You were planning breakfast and trying to remember to water your plants, but in their minds, you were orchestrating some master plan. But here's where it gets truly disturbing and also deeply, darkly hilarious. They started rating your moves, giving you scores, like you're in some twisted competition. Silent strategy, 9 out of 10. Didn't take the bait during the holidays? 10 out of 10. Avoided all mutual events, perfect execution. They were grading you. and you were acing tests you didn't even know existed. Every time you chose yourself, every boundary you set, every person you cut off without explanation, they documented it like it was evidence. Evidence of what? That you'd become the one thing they feared most. Someone who didn't need them, didn't need closure, didn't need the last word, didn't need anything from the people who thought they were essential to your story. And then there's section 4, and this is where the file goes from creepy to absolutely cinema-worthy. They tried to predict your next move. They had theories, multiple people weighing in with their analysis. They're gonna come back angrier, wrong. They're gonna expose everything publicly, wrong. They're gonna reach out when they're desperate, catastrophically wrong. What you did instead, and this is what has them losing sleep, is you thrived in a way they couldn't pattern. You didn't follow the script of the hurt, the betrayed, the abandoned. You became something they had no reference for, someone who transformed pain into fuel so efficiently that you left no emotional breadcrumbs for them to follow. You went dark, and instead of fading, you evolved. One of them wrote, and this line is burned into my brain now, "It's like they died and came back as someone we can't reach." And another responded, "No, it's worse. They're not unreachable. They just don't see us as worth reaching anymore." That sentence, right there, that's the core of the entire leak. They finally understood, in writing, with timestamps to prove it, that their relevance in your life didn't just decrease, it evaporated. You didn't block them out of anger, you forgot them out of growth. And that realization, that admission that they mattered so little, you didn't even consider them enemies anymore. That broke something in them they'll never get back. Now we need to address the elephant in the leaked document, because this part is where it shifts from strange to genuinely shocking. There's an entire section, pages 7 through 12, dedicated to trying to figure out your source of power. Not your job, not your appearance, not your circumstances, your energy. They couldn't understand how someone who went through what you went through, someone they watched crumble, could come back radiating the kind of presence that makes rooms go quiet. They had theories. And I'm not making this up. They actually brainstormed like amateur psychologists trying to crack a case. Maybe they're faking it. Maybe it's all performance. That was theory 1, and it got dismissed immediately by someone who wrote, "Nobody performs that consistently. Nobody fakes that level of peace." Theory 2, they found someone new, someone giving them confidence. Also wrong, because another person chimed in with, "I checked. They're alone, completely alone, and somehow that makes them scarier." Scarier? Yes, because people who find power in solitude, who don't need external validation, who build their kingdom in silence, those people become untouchable. And you became exactly that. You stopped posting for approval. You stopped moving for applause. You stopped existing for witnesses. And in that isolation, you became the most dangerous version of yourself. But here's the part that's going to make you smile, because it should. Theory 3, the one they seemed to settle on with the most agreement, was this. They've completely detached from needing us to understand them. That's not healing, that's ascension. Ascension, they used that word. Not recovery, not moving on, but ascension. They recognized, in their own words, that you didn't just level up, you left the entire game they were playing. You weren't competing for their attention anymore. You weren't fighting for a seat at tables you'd already outgrown. You weren't trying to prove anything to people whose opinions stopped mattering the moment they showed you who they really were. And then someone wrote something that I need you to hear because it's the ultimate confession. The thing they'll never say to your face but admit it in this file. I think we lost something irreplaceable when we lost them. Not because of what they gave us, but because of what being around them made us feel. Like we were better than we actually are. Read that again. You made people feel elevated just by proximity. And when you left, when you withdrew your presence, your energy, your light, they felt the absence like a physical wound. They didn't just miss you, they missed who they thought they were when you were still around. So the file leaks, and now there's a scramble. Messages are being deleted, people are having emergency calls. There's genuine panic in these circles because they know what this means. It means their obsession is visible now. It means the person they claimed to have moved past, the one they said didn't matter anymore, has been living rent-free in their heads for years. And worse, it means you're gonna find out. Some of them hope you never see it, because the embarrassment would be nuclear. Others are terrified you will see it and realize just how much power you've had this entire time. Because here's what the leak really reveals. Beyond the timelines and theories and desperate attempts to understand you, it reveals that you've been the main character in their story, while they barely registered as background noise in yours. They've been watching you like you're a series they can't stop binge-watching, waiting for the next episode, analyzing every frame, predicting every plot twist. Meanwhile, you've been living your life, healing your wounds, building your peace, completely unaware that you've had an audience studying your every move like it's scripture. That power imbalance, that complete role reversal, it's the ultimate poetic ending to their narrative. And now they're asking each other, what do we do if they find out? As if there's some strategy to salvage this, some way to spin it that doesn't make them look completely unhinged. But there's no spin here, no clever explanation that makes years of obsessive documentation seem normal or justified. They got caught doing exactly what they accused you of. Staying stuck in the past, unable to move forward, clinging to someone who cut them off cleanly and never looked back. The irony is so thick you could build a fortress with it. One message near the end of the file, and this one's recent, from 2 weeks ago, just says this: I think we need to accept that we're never going to understand what happened. They became something we don't have language for, and maybe that's the point. That sentence right there, that's surrender. That's the white flag. That's them finally admitting that all their analysis, all their theories, all their attempts to decode your transformation were pointless. Because you were never trying to be understood by them in the first place. Let's talk about what this means for you right now, in this moment, because this isn't just about them anymore. This is about you realizing something that's going to change how you see your entire journey. Every moment you thought you were alone, invisible, forgotten, you weren't. You were being watched with the kind of intensity usually reserved for phenomena people can't explain. Every choice you made in silence, every boundary you set without announcement, every time you chose yourself over their opinion, documented, analyzed, discussed, debated. You were never as alone as you felt. And that's both haunting and empowering. Because it means your growth, your transformation, your evolution from who you were into who you've become, it happened under surveillance. And you still pulled it off flawlessly. You still became untouchable despite having eyes on you the entire time. Think about that. They had every advantage, every opportunity to understand your patterns, predict your moves, find your weakness, and they came up with nothing except respect, disguised as fear and obsession disguised as curiosity. This is where you need to pause and let this sink in, because most people never get this kind of confirmation. Most people heal in private and never know if anyone noticed. But you have proof, written, time-stamped, detailed proof that your transformation was so significant, so undeniable, so powerful, that it demanded attention from the very people who wanted to see you fail. They couldn't look away, not because you were performing, but because you were becoming. And becoming is always more magnetic than performing. The power shift here is absolute, irreversible, permanent. They went from observers thinking they had the upper hand to subjects realizing they never had control. You went from someone they thought they could figure out to someone they now reference as unexplainable. The file that was supposed to be their insurance policy, their way of maintaining some sense of control, became the document that proves they never had any. Every page is evidence not of your weakness, but of their inability to let go. Now here's what happens next, and this is where your story gets interesting in ways it never has before. You don't need to respond. You don't need to address them. You don't need to acknowledge the file exists or that you know about their obsession, because the most powerful thing you can do right now is absolutely nothing. Let them sit in the discomfort of knowing their secret is out. Let them wonder if you've seen it. Let them spiral trying to guess your next move while you're out here living a life they're not invited to witness anymore. Your silence, the same silence they documented and tried to decode, that's your response. That's your victory speech. That's your microphone drop moment without saying a single word. Because they've spent years trying to get your attention, trying to provoke a reaction, hoping you'd break the silence and give them something, anything, to work with. And if you respond now, if you acknowledge them now, you give them exactly what they've been craving. Don't let the file speak for itself. Let their own words expose them. Let their obsession be the evidence of your impact. Here's the truth. They'll never admit publicly, but confessed in private documents. You became the standard they measure everyone against now. Every new person they meet, every relationship they try to build, every connection they attempt to make, somewhere in the back of their mind, there's a comparison happening. And nobody measures up. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. You didn't curate a fake version of strength. You built actual resilience. You didn't perform healing. You actually healed. And that authenticity, that genuine transformation, it can't be replicated or replaced. They're looking for you in other people and coming up empty because you're not a type, you're not a category, you're not something that can be found again. You're a once-in-a-lifetime encounter that they fumbled, and now they're stuck with the knowledge that they had access to something rare and they destroyed it through their own ignorance. The regret they feel, the one that shows up in the file between the lines, that's gonna follow them longer than any revenge you could have planned. So you're standing here now with information that changes everything and also changes nothing. Because here's the secret. You were always this powerful. The file didn't make you powerful. It just confirmed what you already knew in your bones. That you're unforgettable. That you're irreplaceable. That walking away from people who didn't value you wasn't a loss. It was a liberation that they still haven't recovered from. The leak is just evidence of what your intuition was screaming at you all along. You didn't need their validation then, and you definitely don't need their obsessive documentation now. But what you can take from this, What you should absorb into your cells and carry forward is the confirmation that your impact is permanent. You don't have to try to be memorable. You don't have to fight to be significant. You already are. The people who encounter you, who experience your energy, your presence, your truth, they don't forget. They can't. You're the bookmark in their life story that they return to when they're trying to remember what authenticity looks like. Moving forward, you carry this different now. Not arrogant, but certain. Not loud, but unshakable. You know what you already suspected, that your absence created more impact than most people's presence ever will. That your silence taught lessons their words never could. That your boundary setting became a master class they're still trying to decode. You're not just healed, you're the blueprint. And blueprints don't need approval. They just need to exist, and everything else follows. The file leaked. The truth came out. Their obsession became public record among their circles. And you keep walking forward. Keep building your life. Keep choosing yourself with the same ruthless clarity that made them write those documents in the first place. Because the greatest revenge isn't exposing them. It's continuing to thrive so undeniably that even years from now, they'll still be talking about you while you've long forgotten they exist. Let me leave you with this, because it's the core of everything that just got revealed. They didn't document you because you were broken. They documented you because you were breaking free. Every entry in that file, every timestamp, every note about your behavior, it was them watching someone escape a cage they didn't even know existed. You weren't just healing from them, you were healing from everything their existence represented. False connections, performative love, conditional acceptance, shallow loyalty. And as you healed, as you got quieter and more selective and more boundaried, they panicked. Because people who are used to accessing you, to having you available, to knowing they can pull you back in with the right words or timing, they don't know what to do when the door closes permanently. So they watched, they studied, they tried to find the crack, the vulnerability, the moment you'd come back. And that moment never came. You never came back, not because you were bitter or angry, but because you outgrew the entire ecosystem they existed in. The full story leaked, and the full story is this. You're the one who got away, not in a romantic sense, but in an existential one. You're the person who saw through the illusion, rejected the performance, chose authenticity over comfort, and walked away without looking back. You're the one they'll tell stories about when they're trying to explain to someone new why they have trust issues, why they're emotionally unavailable, why they sabotage connections. You're the ghost in their narrative, the one that got away, the standard they'll never reach again. So yeah, the full story leaked. Their obsession is documented. Their inability to move on is time-stamped. And you're out here living proof that the best way to win is to stop playing their games entirely. You're the evidence that transformation is possible. You're the reminder that some people really do become unreachable, not through cruelty, but through growth. The file leaked, and it told the world exactly what you already knew. That you're unforgettable, irreplaceable, and completely, utterly free. Now go live your life, knowing that while they're still writing about your past, you're busy creating a future they'll never be part of. And that right there is the ultimate ending. Well, look who they couldn't figure out. Look who they spent years studying, dissecting, labeling, and still got completely wrong. You strange, silent, terrifyingly brilliant creature, welcome back. Or better yet, welcome to the part of yourself they were never smart enough to understand. Because what they called weird, what they whispered about at tables you weren't sitting at, what made them uncomfortable in your presence and restless in your absence, that wasn't a flaw. That was the architecture of a mind they didn't have the vocabulary to describe. And the fact that they couldn't name it scared them more than anything else ever could. Before we begin, if this frequency already lives in you, 2 books were written for exactly that mind. The Crown of Ash, Grim Grit Edition, The Quiet Edge, Grim Grit Edition 2. Links in the description. Now let's get into it. Let's be honest about what actually happened. They saw the way your brain worked, and it unsettled them. They saw you pause where others rushed. They saw you notice things no one else caught. They saw you sit quietly in a room full of noise and somehow hear something deeper than the sound. And instead of asking what you were hearing, they decided something was wrong with you. That is what people do when they encounter a frequency they cannot tune into. They don't question the radio. They call the signal broken. They called you broken. But here you are, still transmitting, still receiving, still picking up signals from depths they will never reach. You have been called too quiet, too intense, too much and not enough simultaneously. You have been told you think too deeply, feel too sharply, and analyze too precisely. You have been handed the word weird like it was a diagnosis, like it was something you needed to be cured of, like your mind was a problem requiring a solution. But no one ever told you the truth. The truth is this: every single person who ever called you weird was standing in the presence of a genius and had absolutely no idea what they were looking at. They were holding a rare frequency in their hands and calling it static. There is a specific kind of loneliness that comes with having a mind like yours. It is not the loneliness of being alone in a room. It is the loneliness of being in a room full of people and realizing, slowly and then all at once, that no one is thinking the way you are thinking. No one is following the thread you are following. No one sees the pattern you already mapped out 3 conversations ago, and so you stop talking. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you already know they won't follow you there. And that silence gets mistaken for arrogance, or strangeness, or both. They thought you were distant. What you actually were was already ahead. They thought you were difficult. What you actually were was precise. They thought you were cold. What you actually were was exhausted from translating yourself into a language that kept losing meaning by the time it arrived. Because that is what genius costs. It costs you the easy conversations. It costs you the comfortable smallness. It costs you the nod of recognition from people who simply do not have the depth to meet you where you live. And you paid that price without even understanding that it was a price, because you never chose to be this way. You were just built different, wired different, and the world told you that was something to be ashamed of. But here is what no one explained to you when you were sitting alone at lunch, or being talked over in meetings, or watching everyone else laugh at a joke you had already dismantled in your head before the punchline landed. The cost of being different is not evidence of wrongness. The cost of being different is the tuition. And every year you paid it. Every year you sat in that specific silence and held your mind still and decided to stay anyway. You were earning something they will never be able to buy. You were earning the kind of depth that changes everything. For you, and eventually for the world around you. The ones who called you weird were not wrong that you were different. They were wrong about what different meant. Different, to a fearful mind, means broken. Different, to a perceptive mind, means rare. And rare things are not comfortable. Rare things do not blend in. Rare things make people feel something they cannot articulate, and so they reach for the nearest ugly word and throw it. They threw it at you. For years, some of them threw it, and you carried it like it was true. But it was never true. It was just the only word they had for something they could not measure. Here is a secret they do not teach in any classroom. Genius, in real life, does not look the way it looks in films. It does not arrive in a blaze of obvious brilliance, with everyone applauding and lights overhead. In real life, genius looks awkward. Genius looks restless. Genius looks like someone who cannot sit still in a conversation that is moving too slowly. Genius looks like someone who changes the subject because they already processed the previous one and are 3 subjects ahead. Genius looks, from the outside, almost exactly like what they called you. Odd, distant, intense, hard to read. The geniuses of every era were the most misread people of their time. The people who changed how the world understood itself were almost always first dismissed by the world they were about to change. They were called impractical. They were called dreamers, in the hollow, dismissive sense of that word. They were called too sensitive, too theoretical, too obsessed with things that didn't matter yet. The yet is the entire story. What they were obsessed with always mattered. It just hadn't become undeniable to everyone else in the room. You are living in your yet. The undeniable part is still forming, but it is forming. Think about the way your mind actually operates when no one is grading it. Think about the connections you make that no one asked you to make. Think about the questions you ask that make people uncomfortable because the questions expose something true that everyone else agreed not to look at directly. Think about the way you cannot stop a thought once it starts. Think about the way certain ideas root themselves so deeply in you that you lie awake not from anxiety, but from the weight of something trying to be understood. That is not a disorder. That is not a quirk. That is the architecture of a mind that was built to go further than the average stop. And yes, it is exhausting. No one is going to pretend otherwise. It is exhausting to feel everything at full volume when everyone around you seems to be living at a murmur. It is exhausting to care about precision in a world that rewards approximation. It is exhausting to see what is coming before it arrives and have no one believe you until it has already happened. But exhaustion is not defeat. Exhaustion is evidence. It is proof of how hard you work inside a mind that never fully stops. And that never-stopping mind, that is the engine of everything that is coming for you. You have been noticing things since before you had the language for what you were noticing. You picked up on the inconsistency in someone's story before anyone else did. You felt the shift in a room's energy before any single thing had changed visibly. You saw the outcome of a situation playing forward in your mind while everyone around you was still reacting to the beginning. You tried to say something about it sometimes, and people looked at you like you had invented the concern, like you were being paranoid or dramatic or reading too much into things. Then exactly what you described happened, and somehow they still didn't update their opinion of you. That is the specific cruelty of the perceptive mind. You see the thing, you say the thing happens, and somehow the credit does not go where the vision did. Instead they say, you got lucky. Instead they say it was obvious. Instead they quietly absorb what you gave them, carry it forward, and forget that you were the one who stood there seeing it first, while everyone else was still arguing about whether there was anything to see. This is not a small thing. This is not a grievance. This is a pattern that matters, because what it reveals is that your vision is real, your perception is real, and the world around you is consistently catching up to a place you already were. The patterns you see are not accidents of overthinking. Overthinking is what the underprepared mind calls the prepared mind working at speed. When your brain cycles through 40 possibilities before someone else has considered 5, that is not anxiety dressed up as intelligence. That is processing power. That is the thing that makes certain people dangerous in the most productive sense of the word. The sense that means they cannot be fooled as easily. The sense that means they will find the leverage point in a system faster than anyone else in the room. The sense that means when something actually matters, you want them thinking, and you have always been that person. In every room, every situation, every problem that landed in your life, you were the one running the deeper calculation. Sometimes you hid it. Sometimes you learned to perform the slower version of yourself so people would feel more comfortable. Sometimes you deliberately dimmed the frequency because being fully on was more socially costly than you could afford at that particular moment. And even then, even running at half capacity, you still caught what others missed. Imagine, just for a moment, what you catch when you stop dimming it. They told you that you were too sensitive. They said it like it was a warning, like it was a vulnerability they were kindly alerting you to, like they were doing you a favor by pointing out the crack in your structure. But sensitivity and intelligence are not separate things. They are the same system operating through different channels. The same neural architecture that lets you feel an atmosphere shift when you walk into a room is the same architecture that lets you understand a complex idea from multiple angles simultaneously. They are not different gifts. They are the same gift, expressed in two directions. The most perceptive people in every field, in every discipline, in every creative and analytical domain the world has ever produced, were sensitive people who learned to use that sensitivity as data rather than wound. They felt things sharply. They felt betrayal deeply, injustice viscerally, beauty almost physically. And that sharpness, rather than crippling them, gave them access to a richness of experience that the so-called tougher people around them simply could not reach. Their art was richer. Their analysis was richer. Their understanding of other human beings was richer, because they paid attention with their entire nervous system rather than just their surface mind. When they told you to toughen up, what they were actually asking you to do was to become less accurate. They were asking you to sand down the very instrument that allows you to read the world most precisely. They were asking you to be worse at the thing you are actually built for, in exchange for being more comfortable at a dinner table or a group conversation. And some part of you, the part that just wanted to belong, almost agreed. Some part of you spent years trying to feel less, notice less, care less, because caring that much seemed to cost too much. But you couldn't do it. You couldn't turn it off. Because it isn't something you do, it is something you are. And that refusal to stop feeling, that stubborn, relentless sensitivity that survived every attempt to blunt it, that is one of the most precise things about you. You did not let them make you into someone who moves through the world half-registered. You stayed fully arrived in every moment, even when every moment cost you something. And that staying, that full presence in your own experience, even when experience was painful, is what built the depth in you that makes you genuinely different from the people who told you there was something wrong with how much you felt. Let's talk about what you actually did with all of that time they thought you were wasting. The hours you were in your own head, the silence they called antisocial, the solitude they called isolation. Because you were not absent, you were constructing. You were building frameworks inside yourself that most people spend a lifetime looking for outside themselves. You were developing a relationship with your own mind that most people never get to, because most people are too afraid of what lives in the deep water of their own thinking to ever go there and stay. You went there, you stayed, and yes, sometimes it was uncomfortable. Sometimes the deep water was cold and dark and you came up gasping and told yourself you wouldn't go back. But you always went back. Because something in you understood, even before you had the words for it, that the work being done in that silence was the most important work of your life. The ideas being forged in that solitude were sharper than anything that gets built in the noise. The understanding being constructed in that stillness was more durable than anything assembled in the rush of performance and approval. The world does not reward the inner work while it is happening. It only rewards the results once they are undeniable in public. And so for years, maybe for most of your life so far, you have been doing the kind of work that earns no applause in real time. You have been doing the deeply private, deeply serious labor of becoming someone who actually understands something. Not just someone who sounds intelligent at the right moments, but someone who is genuinely, structurally, bone-deep intelligent. And that kind of intelligence takes the time it takes. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be performed. It has to be built, and you have been building it. So when they dismissed the time you spent thinking as time wasted, when they told you to get out of your head, when they made you feel like the internal life you were living was a form of avoidance rather than a form of construction, they were wrong about the most fundamental thing. They thought the stillness was emptiness. It was never emptiness. It was a workshop. And the things being made inside it are going to outlast every opinion that was formed about you on the surface. Here is the part that is uncomfortable to say, but too important to leave out. The people who tried hardest to convince you that something was wrong with you were almost always the people who had the most to lose if you ever fully understood how capable you were. Because your full capability is a mirror, and what it reflects back is the gap between what they settled for and what was actually possible. The moment you stop apologizing for your mind is the moment their choices become visible by contrast. And that visibility, that undeniable comparison, is something small people cannot survive. They needed you to stay confused. They needed you to keep questioning yourself, keep second-guessing your perceptions, keep circling back to the same doubts they planted precisely because doubt is the one thing that slows a mind like yours all the way down. A confident genius is unstoppable. A confused genius is manageable. And so they worked consistently, sometimes consciously, and sometimes just through the casual cruelty of people who do not examine their own motives, to keep you in the zone of confusion. To keep you asking, is something wrong with me, instead of asking, what am I actually capable of? The people who called you too much were always the people who were not enough. The people who called you too intense were always the people who had never committed to anything with full force. The people who called you too deep were always the people who were afraid of what they would find if they ever stopped skimming the surface of their own lives. And so they looked at your depth and they called it a problem. They looked at your intensity and they called it a flaw. They looked at the full, burning, relentless reality of your mind and decided that what they were looking at was wrong, because the alternative that they might be the incomplete ones, was something they simply could not afford to know. But here is what they miscalculated. They thought if they made you doubt yourself long enough, you would eventually agree with them. They thought repetition would become reality. They thought the sheer weight of their collective opinion would eventually compress your understanding of yourself into a shape that fit their comfort level. What they did not account for is what you actually are. What they did not account for is the specific quality of a mind that has been tested by difficulty and emerged not broken but clarified. What they did not account for is that pressure, applied to the right kind of material, does not crush it, it sharpens it. The education system was not built for you. That is not a comfortable thing to say, but it is an accurate one. The education system was built for the median, for the repeatable, for the mind that absorbs information in a linear sequence and can produce it back on demand in a standardized format. And your mind does not work that way. Your mind works through connection, through pattern, through the sudden lateral leap that takes two things that seem unrelated and finds the invisible thread between them. Your mind works through deep immersion in things that interest you, and almost complete disengagement from things that do not. That is not a learning disability. That is a different kind of intelligence architecture. The things you learned fastest were the things no one taught you in a classroom. The things you understand most deeply are the things you arrived at through your own relentless questioning, your own circling, your own refusal to accept the surface answer when the deeper answer was clearly still down there waiting. You have always been a self-directed mind in a system that rewards following directions. And the gap between what you were built to do and what you were asked to do created a friction that got mistaken for incompetence. It was never incompetence. It was incompatibility. There is an enormous difference. The grades they gave you were not a measurement of your intelligence. They were a measurement of how well your intelligence aligned with the specific format of measurement being used. And the format was always the wrong one for the way you think. The tests were always optimized for a kind of thinking you were not built to perform at its best. And so you walked away from institutions carrying scores and assessments that told a story about you that was structurally incapable of being accurate. You walked away from a measuring system that didn't have a unit of measurement that corresponded to what you actually had. And somewhere in you, you knew it. Even when no one else believed it, some part of you always knew the score was wrong. The intelligence that actually lives in you is the kind that shows up in real problems, in real situations, in the moments when the framework fails and someone has to think outside of it. It shows up when the map stops matching the territory and someone has to navigate anyway. It shows up in the midnight insight, in the problem that has stumped everyone else for weeks, until the moment you sit down with it alone and something in your mind reaches out and simply touches the answer. That kind of intelligence does not score well on standardized tests, but it does the things that matter most when the stakes are highest. You have always understood people better than most of them understood themselves. You watched, from a very early age, the way people performed versus the way people actually were. You noticed the gap between the story someone told about themselves and the story their behavior was telling simultaneously. You watched people claim values they didn't hold and disown feelings they were obviously experiencing. You saw the subtext running under the text, the secondary motive moving behind the stated one, the real wound being protected by the elaborate constructed personality on top of it. And you understood, even if you couldn't articulate it, what all of it meant. This made you strange to people, because when you see someone that clearly, you cannot pretend not to. You cannot sit across from someone and perform the social fiction that you believe the performance they are giving. Something in you is always reading the deeper layer. Something in you is always tracking the thing no one said, and people feel that. Even when they cannot name it, even when they have no conscious awareness that they are being perceived at the level they are being perceived at, they feel it, and it makes them uncomfortable. Because being truly seen, not the version of yourself you present, but the actual version, is one of the most uncomfortable human experiences. So they called you intense. They called you strange. They said you made them feel a certain way they couldn't explain, and that feeling was not entirely comfortable. What they were describing was the experience of being in the presence of someone who was actually paying attention. Not the social surface kind of attention, the real kind. The kind that misses nothing and forgets nothing and connects what it finds into a picture that is, more often than not, significantly more accurate than the picture the subject has of themselves. That is not a social disadvantage. That is a profound and rare human capacity, and you have had it since before you knew what to do with it. The question now is not whether you have this capacity. The question is what you are going to do with it, now that you understand what it is. Because a mind that can read people, read systems, read patterns, read the thing beneath the thing, is not a mind built for a small life. It is not a mind built for the background. It is a mind built for the exact work of the moment you are currently living in, which is the work of figuring out what is real, what is true, and what the actual shape of the territory looks like under all the maps that have been drawn wrong.